Hi everyone, and welcome back to our fourth CommsCon session today. I'm here to run you through the housekeeping parts again, and sorry if you've already heard these, but just going to go through them for everyone who's just joined us in this session. Please submit your Q&A questions in the box on the left. We also have a group chat function at the bottom. We will be giving some time at the end of the session for all questions, so please do submit them throughout the session. Don't wait till the end as well. You can please book a demo or a meeting at the right-hand side of your screen. And that's all in terms of housekeeping. Now that's out of the way, it's my pleasure to announce Cision's VP of Customer Experience as moderator, Matt, and he is joined by Jennifer Ongalea, who is the Transport and Sports PR Manager at KPMG, Farshad Hashmatullah, who is the Press Relations Manager at Zoom, and Nick Govier, the CEO and founding partner at Blurred. They'll chat through their experiences throughout the pandemic and how they've managed to keep everything afloat. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you, Polly. Good afternoon all, and welcome to this afternoon's panel session, where we have three great guests joining me. As Polly said, we have Nick Govier, CEO and founder from Blurred. We have Joe Ogunleye from KPMG, and finally, Farshad Hashmatullah from Zoom joining me on our virtual stage. Now, my name is Matt Mishkovsky. I'm the VP of Customer Experience here at Cision in EMEA. Now, I joined Cision back in November last year, so this is my first CommsCon event, and I'm really privileged not just to be here as an audience member, but also the panel facilitator for this session. So that's enough about me now, and I guess we move on to our real stars of the show, and that's our panellists, who will be sharing their views and experiences of business in what has been a very abnormal world for the last kind of 10 to 12 months. Can I ask each of our panellists to give the audience a quick 60-second introduction to themselves? And we'll start with Nick, I think.
Hi, hello everyone. I'm Nick from Blurred, Nick Govier. Blurred, we're a young company, just over 2 years old, but we've travelled quite a long way in a short period of time. And the name comes from the blurring of the lines that now exists everywhere that we look in terms of what companies do and what they actually are. Very few can sit neatly in their set boxes anymore. In terms of disciplines, so not only is there a blurring of the lines in terms of marketing disciplines, but also consulting. So where does management consulting end and marketing begin? In terms of audience groups, crucially, corporate is consumer, internal is external. We all care deeply about the businesses behind the brands. And finally, the blurring of the lines between what's real and what's fake, who's kind of properly walking the talk, and who's kind of greenwashing, for example. And that's me.
Thanks, Nick. Let's move on to Joe, please.
Hi, so I lead on TMT, PR at KPMG, that's tech, media and telecoms, as well as our forensic technology, which is fraud, and transport and sports. So quite a big bag there. I also am a board member of the PRCA Race and Ethnicity Equity Board, and a trustee of the Taylor Bennett Foundation, which is a charity that exists to get more BAME talent from BAME heritage into the PR industry. And that's me.
Excellent. Thanks, Joe. And finally, Farshad, please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Matt. Hello, everyone. My name is Farshad. I'm from Zoom Video Communications. We're a unified communications platform that some of you might have used within the last year or even beyond that. Our platform offers many different services. And I've been at Zoom for about 2.5 years, leading our international PR strategy and teams.
Excellent. Thanks, Farshad. Before we get to our first question, just a quick reminder that we will be taking questions from you, the audience, at the end. So please keep adding them to the box. We'll get through as many of those as possible, as I said, at the end of the session. Moving on to the first question, though, for the panellists. In the last 10 months, companies have been placed under more pressure probably than ever before to really deliver what is a high-quality experience for their customers. An easy one to start with. Who is the one company that has wowed you during the pandemic and why? I'll let the audience into a bit of a secret. In the prep session beforehand, I banned the fact that Amazon could have been one of their answers. It seems to be everyone's go-to answer. So Amazon is banned as an answer, but we'll move on to Nick and see who your company is. Nick.
So I'm actually going to refer to Coca-Cola and disclosure. They're one of our clients, but we didn't work on the stuff I'm talking about. But I just think I saw firsthand what I think is the most important way that any business could have reacted. And that was that they reacted as a business rather than a brand. So where there was quite a lot of superficial activity jumping up of people, capitalizing on the situation with kind of quirky brand stuff, they made a very difficult decision, which was hard for a lot of their marketing agencies as well, of putting a pause on marketing globally and diverting all of the money and funds and resources towards the causes, the areas that actually needed support. And for me, that was an incredibly bold move. And they didn't kind of shout and scream about it. They just went, you know what, this is a time where our fleets, all the partnerships we have, we can use this for good, and diverted millions. And then when they did actually come back from that, we were involved in that, they really thought about it in terms of how can we support not only our consumers, but our customers as well, the bars, the shops, etc., and kind of passed over even their advertising space for them to use. And for me, it is this thing of acting as a business rather than a brand. And actually, I stole that line from Stu, my fellow founding partner, but it really, really resonated with me. And so many of our clients asked us at the time, how can we be deemed to have done the right thing at the end of this? And we were like, very simple, do the right thing. Use what you've got to make a difference right now. And I think those companies really stood out.
Awesome. Great. I like that. And we'll come back to a couple of points you raised there, I think, in further questions. Farshad, let's go to you now. What's the one company that really has wowed you during the last kind of 10 to 12 months?
I love the example that Nick provided. The company that I really thought about more kind of on a personal and maybe even selfish level was, Netflix. I feel like, within the last year, I've been, spending a lot of time at home with not being able to go outdoors after work on the weekend, between meal prep and whatever I'm doing around the house. I feel like I always have Netflix on. And that they always have great content. And I feel like they've really stepped up their game in the service and content that they've been providing with new shows and movies. I feel like I can never keep up with everything that they're providing, which is kind of a good problem to have. I'm still watching a lot of their older shows. But I think kind of what they've done to step up and quickly, provide content to keep people who are spending a lot of time on their couch and keep them entertained and safe at home is a shout out I'd like to give.
Excellent. Yeah, can relate to that as well. Joe, finally on to you. What's the one company that really has wowed you?
I mean, we probably should have talked about this beforehand. I was going to say Netflix. I agree with everything that Farshad just said. And the speed at which they've been able to respond to things as well. So, for instance, following the Black Lives Matter movement, they were able to curate, adapt content, recommend content, kind of categorize it, everything like that, in order to educate. Yes, during COVID, but also during these societal movements, during the political movements of recent times as well. They've been great, but I guess, without going on about Netflix, as we've just spoken about it, another go-to in general would be the small business community. So, obviously they were hit harder than most. They don't have the same resources in terms of, let's talk about digital transformation. Let's roll out an entire collaborative tool that everyone in our firm can use. A lot of them, maybe their customer base was, based on proximity, someone who can pop in, down the road to a small local shop, and they've now had to kind of really pivot, maybe offer delivery services when they didn't have that infrastructure or operations in place. Set up a website when they might not be so tech savvy. And absolutely upheave their business models. And to Nick's point as well about those kind of, I guess, again, just wider industries or businesses that have the resources that were diverting those resources for the right reasons, whether those were football clubs who said, use our locations as storage, exhibition centers who said we'll be temporary hospitals, or hotels which said we're going to set up pit stops or what's the word I'm looking for, drive-throughs for, paramedics and so on to be able to pop in and have lunch. So that's me.
I'm so pleased you mentioned the small business environment, because I think from a personal experience for me, I look at someone like my personal trainer. He's someone that's had to pivot his business 3, 4, 5, 6 times in the last 9 months, and that's hard. That's hard for a brand and a business that are established like a Netflix or a Coca-Cola, but for an individual that is having to continuously reevaluate and reinvent himself has been hugely challenging. It's hugely pressurized for him. So that's so my call out is for Chris Kelly, my personal trainer. We'll move on to the next question now. You all have very, very varied backgrounds. You work in very different fields, different industries at very different companies. But seemingly on the surface, all of those companies have navigated the pandemic pretty well. And I'd like to explore in a little bit more detail how the companies you work for really approached the pandemic. I'm going to start with Nick first. Let's start with you. I saw an article, and I can't remember how long ago it was, so apologies if you haven't got it firsthand. But you spoke, I think, about how Blurred adjusted their working hours, they adjusted some of their staff benefits. So it really was kind of how you approached the pandemic as a company. Can you tell maybe the audience a little bit more about that and why you saw that as important?
Yeah, I mean, in many ways, actually, it was easier for us to adjust than many because we were already a company that had no set working hours, no set office time. So we were already really well set up for people to work from home. But it was a huge emotional shock. It was horrific. You know, we had people with COVID. I had potentially had COVID or acute bronchitis. It was early. I still don't know. You know, whilst working like 18-hour days trying to navigate this massive change. So what we put front and center was really people's mental health and the realization that we were all experiencing, like I said, kind of chronic shock, really. So we did a few things. We already have coaching in place for everyone within the company, but we upped it and also canned kind of people's probation, which previously they needed to pass probation to get access to the coach. We were just like, right, this is now available for everyone, and introduced lots of initiatives that still run today. So one of them was called Healthy Body, Healthy Minds. And then we do daily fitness workouts from Pilates to combat was today, particular favourite, proper aggressive stuff. But we didn't just invite our teams, it was also our clients and our cohort members. So this idea that we were just trying to support people in our broader network as well. So these times are tough, but we're going to put all these things in place to help you. And they've really massively paid dividends, I think. And because people know they were cared for. And we've just tried to listen and also be really open and really honest with people, you know, tell them what we're thinking, tell them what we're feeling. I was open right at the end of last year, actually, with people. It came to half term with the kids and I wasn't actually due to be off. But for 2 afternoons, I had to just sit and watch Disney films with my kids because I felt I couldn't, you know, I was exhausted. But I was really open with my team. I was like, I feel I need this right now. I have to do this for my mental health. You know, follow suit, do whatever you need to do, because I think on top of just the complexities of it, it's just with so many extra layers on us in terms of worrying about our children and their mental health and everything else. So I'm so pleased we took that approach. And we also, by the way, linking to what you just said, we co-created a small business survival guide. I just thought I'd throw that in. Even though we don't work with small businesses ourselves, it wasn't our idea, but we supported Happy Oak, who were leading on it. And just did lend our expertise to say, look, these are the things you need to consider. And some of the stuff we were talking about were in that, you know, open and honest, conversations with your teams, etc.
Excellent. One thing I just want to kind of dig into a little bit more, I think one of the lines as well that came through in that article I read was staying true to the core values of the business. I think you mentioned probably one there around healthy body, kind of healthy mind. I presume that's incorporated somewhere within that. What else? What are the core values that you haven't mentioned?
Well, our whole purpose is around depth in an industry often categorized by the superficial. So if we only do things if we do them properly, you know, we only work for clients if we're working at a really deep senior level. Not that we only support our teams but if we're going to support our teams, we're going to support them properly. We're going to get the best coaching, that we can possibly give them. We're not going to do, one fitness class a week. We're going to do it every day because that's what people need. But it's also reflective of what we do. All the work we do is focused around ESGP. And ESG essentially stands for environmental, social and governance. And social is kind of human issues. And P stands for purpose. And we believe you can't have the P without the ESG. And ESG is really about how we measure the material risks that businesses pose to the world. So at the heart of what we do is about making businesses better, making them be better businesses, ensuring they're brilliant from an environmental perspective, ensuring they look after people, their own people plus others, ensuring they do the right thing from a governance perspective. So in other words, we're going to do that ourselves. If we're doing that for other people and we don't do that ourselves, then we're not being true to what we do. We're not being authentic. So it's really chicken and egg. I often wonder, are we a business focused on ESGP because that's where our personal values came, or was it the other way around? And actually, I think they're just completely linked together. The reason I sleep well at night is because we help make businesses be better businesses. And then we get to creatively tell the world about it, which is just a dream. But of course, if we're making our clients perform better and really understand D&I and their responsibilities, of course, we're going to take that seriously ourselves, or we'd be, making a mockery of it, frankly.
Excellent. I loved hearing that, Nick. Thank you. Joe, let's move on to you. It almost feels like the references to KPMG are associated with bad news, and i.e. the collapse of a company that KPMG are maybe introduced to as the auditor to oversee that process. The pandemic's clearly impacted certain industries, whether that is travel, whether that's retail. You're seeing collapses of some pretty significant brands. How did KPMG react to the pandemic as a business, and did they see it as an opportunity?
Exactly what you're referring to. It's really difficult when you're a firm that ideally, at the end of the day, this is a business that wants to be known for how to help your business grow. But obviously, there are a lot of stories which go untold. If something doesn't result in an administration or headline number of job losses, then obviously those stories aren't as headline grabbing or sexy as a very bad news story. And obviously there are going to be certain parts of the business concerned with how much coverage you might be getting or the disproportionate amount of coverage you're getting for that work. But that is where, of course, journalists go. And we, as you say, we will get, as a result of that kind of work, you will get MPs and other querying about firms making money from people's miseries. But at the end of the day, we want to make sure that that these jobs are done well, as many jobs as possible are saved. And obviously there has to be that balance as well, with communicating pay freezes, redundancies and things like that. With emotionally driven confidence, communications, which I think we've seen a real rise of during the pandemic, especially in terms of internal comms. And there's been a huge increase in employee engagement during the pandemic because of many of the things that Nick's just outlined as well. The constant change in guidance from the government, for instance, will impact a lot of your workers disproportionately, whether it be mothers, whether it be people with certain specific needs that really need a workplace, a separate workplace, for instance, in terms of accessibility or whatever that might be. So I think employee engagement has been really a strong leader in terms of also modeling your external communications with, and having those really important relationships with journalists as well, who understand that we cannot say things right now because we have to communicate to those who, or the client has to communicate to companies, to the employees of the company where something might be about to take place. And having that relationship with journalists has been more important than ever because they'll trust that, you're not delaying them for no reason. That kind of trust, that authenticity, that being as transparent as you possibly can, is allowed in certain circumstances, I think has been really, really important in terms of how they've approached the pandemic.
I think it's interesting hearing Joe and you, Nick, as well, previously talking around things like authenticity, vulnerability, the increase in emotion in all of this as well. So looking forward to seeing how that pans out in the rest of the questions and maybe digging a little bit deeper. Let's move on to Farshad. I guess on the surface, Zoom have probably had one of the most amazing 12 months of any company. Not only has the product exploded with unprecedented increase, I'm sure, in users, it's got to the stage, I think Tom, our UK CEO, mentioned in his introduction, where Zoom has actually effectively now become a verb. When did Zoom actually realise they had to respond to the world situation and the pandemic? And what was that opportunity like? Farshad?
Sure thing, Matt. I think acknowledged that even from the very beginning. Us being a unified communications platform, our mission is to empower people to accomplish more and to stay connected and to stay productive. So it was an immense responsibility for us as a company on making sure that we're delivering that and that we're keeping institutions and folks and individuals connected as much as possible. I think, when you're in a moment like this, a once in a century event or pandemic, your company culture comes front and center. At Zoom, our company culture is to deliver happiness to each other and our customers. So our first response as a company was, to ensure that Zoomies is what we call Zoom employees were safe and that they're happy in where they were and that they had the resources they needed to stay connected. So, a lot of different things were done by facilities in our company to ensure that we had standing desks and to have basically the right tools and things that we needed, such as lighting, to have our virtual interactions. And I think as Nick alluded to this as well, we all were, kind of working from home and delving into kind of a remote kind of culture slowly. But I think the pandemic took that and expedited it 10x. So even Zoom as a company, we use our platform on a daily basis to communicate with each other and our customers. It's something that we, just weren't necessarily ready for as a workforce to overnight go remote as well. So I think, our first reaction was to ensure that our Zoomies were in a place to where they could deliver happiness to our customers. And once they were happy and in a place to do so, how do we ensure that we're laser focused on our customers and their needs of today? Having, most organizations, institutions, and entities, going remote or satellite offices or working from home basically overnight. There was a lot of questions and help that they needed, and their priorities had shifted too, as far as like feature requests and capabilities. It was no longer like, hey, I need this feature because it helps us do something better in the office. It's like, hey, I need these set of features in order to keep my team connected, whether it's better lighting, noise suppression, because now that we're at home, there could be someone vacuuming right behind me, or my dogs are barking, or my kids are running around. There was a set of new kind of requests that were needed to be put in place. And how do we respond to that as quickly as possible? One of the things that we really hold true to our innovation is listening closely to our customers and innovating on their needs of today. So one example of that is, for example, there's a lot of features that we had on our roadmap for a couple of years and that we're going to work towards getting to that just weren't a priority for us at that point, such as, people count in rooms, monitoring air quality and features like that come with the Zoom Rooms experience, which is a conference room solution that Zoom offers. So basically, now that we're kind of going into an era where some markets are opening up and re-entering the office and others are looking at a hybrid workforce, it's like, how do we, we have to kind of bring those features up front on our roadmap, and how do we prioritize those things to deliver to the needs of our customers today? And another example that I have is, kind of the immense responsibility that we felt to keep, schools and education to continue. Education is a very vulnerable kind of area, and how do you do this virtually, and how do you do it successfully? So how do we listen to teachers and ensure that we're delivering a platform that's best for their needs? So one of the first things that we did back in February and March was, as countries were announcing that they're going in complete lockdown, especially with their education systems going from home, we ensured that we are providing an uncapped free version of Zoom to all schools. So 100K schools over 25 different countries that we were providing this free program to. And I think one last thing that I like to end on is, in our company, all hands, our CEO, Eric, likes to bring up this line that always sticks to me, and I think sticks with a lot of employees or Zoomies, is, 10 years from now, you guys are working really hard now, we're having to crank and we're expanding our team to be able to accommodate kind of all the work that we're doing. But 10 years from now, when you look back, it will ensure that you'll be happy and proud of what you've done.
Great stuff, Farshad. As a bit of a SaaS and software geek, I really enjoyed watching Zoom and your competitors kind of almost have a feature battle. It felt like that roadmap of product enhancements were kind of coming out almost on a daily, weekly basis, as the likes of you competed against maybe a Microsoft Teams or a WebEx or even a Google Hangouts, which I imagine is more in the consumer space. But it was great from my perspective to see that battle kind of take place in front of my eyes. Let's actually explore probably this in a little bit more detail now. The pandemic really brought significant change to all of our lives, both as professionals, and we're here today as professionals, but we're also here as consumers. What changes did you actually see in your customer base? So Farshad, you're up on screen still, so let's continue with you. What were the changes you saw in your customer base? Was there different industries? Were there different user cases? Was it something else?
Absolutely. As I mentioned, the pandemic was nothing that we could have even if we tried to plan for it. I think it's nothing that we as a company could have planned for or foreseen kind of the different use cases that would have came with it. Zoom was initially designed primarily for enterprise customers, large institutions with full IT support. With the pandemic, we saw hundreds of new use cases that we could have never imagined, from weddings to virtual field trips to happy hours to game nights, and the list goes on. One fun example that I like to share is, the communications team, myself at Zoom, back when we were together, we'd always do, team bonding activities. We'd go to a park and have a picnic, or we'd go to the beach every couple months, or we'd go to a hockey game. Luckily, we're positioned really close to the Sharks Arena nearby. But now that we're virtual, how do we, maintain that culture, and how do we continue to connect and have team bonding events? And one thing that we did that was really fun is we decided to do a cooking class over Zoom, which was something that I hadn't thought about before. And we hired a professional cook, and they took us step-by-step on, how to prepare an eggs Benedict. And I got to say, my hash browns turned out great, but my hollandaise sauce, not so much. But I guess the point that I'm trying to get at is, we went from not only providing to enterprises, but also catering to parents, grandparents, yoga and cooking teachers, small businesses, professors, healthcare professionals, and basically anyone who needed to connect with someone else. And in doing so, we learned that our new user base needed additional support, like the tips and tricks and the how-tos to kind of use our platform to its full capability. So how do we, provide those quick trainings and resources to best enable them? The platform is very feature-rich, and how do we train them up to be able to make the most of their virtual experience?
Excellent. Thank you, Farshad. Nick, let's move on to you. Is this similar for you? What changes did you see in your customer base?
Well, we actually ended up totally reevaluating our offer. It was an evolution rather than a revolution. That was still totally true to our purpose and this notion of the blurring of the lines and corporate is consumer, etc. But it was actually, I remember it so clearly because I'd actually taken the May half term off, even though I was at home and couldn't go anywhere. And I'd made what turns out to be a really good decision to properly shut down, move away from email, to check, an hour once a day. And I let my kind of mind go into this place called mindlessness, which I'm a massive believer in. It's different from mindfulness. Mindlessness is when you're just free to just see where it kind of takes you. And the best way often when I'm doing that is when I'm watching the same film for the 50th time with my kids, and I have to be watching it with them, that your mind just kind of floats around. And suddenly just loads of things came clearly to me. It was the realization that companies with good ESG ratings were wildly outperforming the rest of the market by 88%. So those companies that were good companies who were doing things right were faring way better than others within the COVID situation. The other was Black Lives Matter and what was happening there. And just suddenly that realization that ESG was coming to the forefront and was reaching every single audience group. Whether or not a company shared a black square or not was an ESG issue. Whether or not then they could stand up to scrutiny in terms of if they had a right to. Whether or not they could answer about the diversity of their own boards, or whether they treated their own people right. It was just this sudden coming together in my mind that ESGP, and we coined that by putting the two things together, was where it was at, frankly. And that's how we ended up kind of evolving to that, and had a comedy conversation. I ended up bringing one of my business partners straight away going, I think I can see so clearly our vision. And at a board meeting a week later, our FD was like, hold on, let me just take a step back here. You're saying in the middle of a pandemic, you want us to narrow our offering, and do, less for people. And I was like, yes, because this is what we can do better than anyone else. And we can see the opportunity. So I think the point I actually want to land, though, is this importance of mindlessness, because that's what I find so hard right now. I can hear my kids, the other side of the door. I walk out of this door and I've got children in my ears, my husband talking about supper. If we don't make time in our lives for our mind to unspool, we simply won't have innovation, because we simply won't have enough space for these ideas and these kind of notions to take root and to land. So I love this question, because actually, I felt I can offer something in terms of I know we're all busy and it's so difficult, but unless you create those opportunities for yourself, you simply won't be able to have the space in your head to actually see what your business needs to do.
Well, Nick, we've had a couple of questions in around, I think, the environment to be, and what's the best environment to create innovation? So we'll come back to that, because I think there is some more that we can dig into. But I'm keen to move on to Joe and learn a little bit more about the customer base at KPMG and if you saw much changes within that. So Joe, over to you.
Yeah, I mean, like I said earlier around insolvencies, obviously that was a huge area of business. But I work in technology, so there's obviously been a boom, whether it's ed tech, whether it's biotech, whether it's social media, TMT, telecoms, media, technology, and so on. Those areas haven't been impacted by the pandemic in the same exact way, whether it be mergers, whether it be acquisitions. But, there's been a huge rise in fraudulent behavior. Obviously, we were talking about the age of innovation. Fraud, it thrives on uncertainty. So that is going to be, one to watch in 2021, because obviously we're now seeing again also the rise in, or the potential rise in, virtual courts and digital justice, because how else are we going to kind of catch up with the amount of fraud that took place last year, especially around furlough and people making fraudulent claims. So innovation has had to come in the sense, and this is from whole industries. Obviously, KPMG's customer base is enormous, but innovation in terms of entire industries was definitely seen. Digital transformation, I think it's been a journey. So obviously, one of my favorite areas to talk about is privacy, and when everyone was trying to kind of figure out business continuity right at the beginning of the pandemic, at that period, I think most customers, me myself as a customer, as a consumer, in terms of when I would usually expect a delivery to arrive on time, I was definitely more forgiving. If a company was hacked just after its entire workforce had moved home, I think people were more understanding then than they would be now. If right now, I feel that companies should be confident in that journey in terms of I hope my data is protected with you. We've been in this pandemic for almost a year now. We've been in this pandemic for almost a year now, so it isn't the age of the abnormal. This is the normality that we have to get used to. Obviously, we want to make it out of it, and many are preparing for that. But innovation has to be responsible, because people won't accept not being prepared as normal, especially when it comes to tech. Tech isn't it's not simply a tool right now. It's not simply its own industry right now. It's our entire way of life. It's how we're hosting this conference right now. It's how I keep in touch with people. So I think definitely there's definitely been, a journey when it comes to what our customer base has looked like, and what people have definitely kind of been expecting in terms of behavior, in terms of communications. I think, we've touched on it a number of times now, but that kind of consciousness, that kind of humanity, I think, yes, you'll sometimes find organizations making strategy decisions with optics as their first concern. We'll do whatever looks best. But I think consumers have become much more challenging to that, whether it's with Black Lives Matter, whether it's with the environment, whether it's with, as Nikki was talking about, ESG and so on. The scrutiny for every single industry has increased enormously, and the expectation on doing the right thing has absolutely increased, whether it's for a political organization or a commercial business.
Talk a little bit more, please, Joe, about the expectation piece. What does that expectation look like and feel like?
So if we talk about, for me, I prefer to talk about kind of Black Lives Matter, for instance. Tech companies so in terms of innovation, and not even just Black Lives Matter, but just in terms of responsible innovation, like I say, technology is so much a part of our lives now that the dangers of irresponsible innovation are life-threatening. So they'll impact communities that that aren't necessarily the powers to be. So it can start as little as the debate in the tech industry around language. So there was a point where developers and whatnot were talking about. I think it's within the coding kind of language around using the terms master and slave with developer materials, people are saying, is that simply is that simply symbolic that we will make small changes like that? I think that. As a communicator, obviously, I 100% think that language is important, because also that language is what is built into the technology that we use. So in terms of innovations, you can say, oh, we're moving forward so quickly, this is the fourth industrial revolution and whatnot. But if you're still, the innovations that you're making are holding communities back, then, obviously, is that truly innovation? We have examples like, there was a time when the soap dispensers were less likely to dispense soap if it was a black hand. There's research that shows that autonomous vehicles are less likely to stop if it's a black person in front. And that's the innovation that's taking this world forward. So I think the talk earlier on diversity was, referred to the black squares that people posted. The backlash to that was brilliant to see, because their audiences were holding companies to account. How dare you post this without showing that you mean it? Because it filters down into so many different levels of a business and so many different levels of society. Because, as I say, tech isn't just a tool; it's a whole way of life. It's the future, right?
Yeah. Joe, thank you. The responsibility piece is so key in that. Just a quick reminder for the audience, we'll still be taking questions, so please pop them in the Q&A box, which should be on the left-hand side, if I've got that the right side. Let's just carry on with the questions and the reaction to change. Did you, as companies, really truly innovate and deliver something new, or was it really just more of a shift, or did you actually double down on maybe where your real expertise and deep knowledge is? Let's go to Farshad. Talk a little bit more, please, about Zoom. I think you touched on it in your previous response.
Absolutely. I think it's a little bit of all three of those areas, innovation and while focusing on kind of what we do best to empower people to be able to communicate. So Zoom became, critical infrastructure overnight. We became the doctor's office, we became the courtrooms, we became the classrooms. And our first order of priority was to make sure that we keep the lights on and to ensure that our infrastructure could support the millions of new users. Luckily for Zoom, we had a globally distributed data centers, which made it relatively easy for us to quickly scale and support the millions of new users on the platform. But now that the users are on the platform, teachers were always using Zoom, even pre-pandemic, for PTA meetings and things like that, and potential once-in-a-while field trips. Doctors were using it with some patients that weren't able to travel to the healthcare facility, and it might have been used across different verticals. But now it's like, this is what they do. Like, everything that they do happens over Zoom, whether it's doctors meeting all patients, unless if they have COVID, over Zoom for all appointments. I know I've had that experience, or teachers teaching all their classes at universities or K through 12 and higher ed over Zoom. So how do we ensure that we closely listen to their needs of today, and specialize our platform to their specific needs? For example, a couple of features that we had announced were, not allowing kids to rename themselves on the screen. Because, if I'm a student, I'm at a certain age, and I like to do that. I like to name myself Mickey Mouse, and that's not fun for everyone else. And providing teachers with certain features that really enable them to hold a classroom environment as best as possible. And also, a lot of those, especially with education, some of it had to do around security and privacy. You have a lot of kids in the classroom. These meetings are public. And it's very easy for someone to just easily post that meeting link online or someplace. So how do we ensure that we're keeping those classrooms safe? Putting things in place such as waiting rooms, the ability for a teacher to talk in a meeting, and also bringing all those security and privacy features under the fingertips of the user. So one thing that I mentioned earlier was that Zoom was developed as an enterprise platform, and that's what we are designed for in the beginning. Initially, we'll have IT departments with full IT support. So those trainings with their employees on how to use a new tool that they're deploying, and they'll enable the best features and capabilities that are needed for every department's kind of activities. But when you come to teachers and for example, my girlfriend Kristen, she's actually a kindergarten teacher. Those functionality and settings and things aren't very easy for the everyday individual to find and locate. So how do we make that easy? One of our trademarks of our platform is ease of use. So how do we bring those things under the fingertips? So one thing we did was create a security icon within the meeting itself. So bringing all those security features that we had in settings on the back end and bringing it right into the meeting experience so they could one click see a drop down of everything that they could do. Same thing for healthcare and different use cases, as I mentioned, and making sure that we're there's listening closely and working to not only release features for the sake of releasing features or to check off a box, but to innovate in a way that takes that feature and really thinks about its use case, not just now, but in the future and post-pandemic. So over 300 features and capabilities across the platform last year alone. In addition to some other exciting things to support the small business users. And when you're thinking about innovation, how do you think about responsibly innovating, and how do you think about inclusiveness, and how do you think about innovating in a way so that you're enabling everyone? So accessibility features to help people who are visually impaired or hard of hearing, and providing them features and capabilities to help them and enable them to be able to collaborate virtually as well. And kind of going to that piece of the everyday user just not being fully aware of if actually it was really funny. My grandma actually called me over Zoom and she said she wanted to do it, and she was able to do it. It was last week, and we had a chat over Zoom. She always calls me over the phone. She said that she was able to watch a YouTube video and learn about all the little cool things that we have. She was using the virtual background and doing different really cool and fun things within the meeting. So ensuring and quickly pivoting so that we are delivering how-to videos, brochures, daily webinars, and live demos to provide assistance as quickly as possible when the pandemic first struck, so that we're best enabling these new users on our platform to make the most of the experience.
That's brilliant. I love the story about the grandparent as well, and totally can relate to that. Look, I'm gonna accelerate a little bit now. You are all in PR and communications, and we've spoken about how you and your companies responded to the pandemic, delivering services, products, maybe even customer experiences. But how did your PR strategy actually need to react and change and adapt to the pandemic? So let's start with Nick this time. Nick, can you talk a little bit more about that, please?
Yeah, I just want to jump in on the back of something that Arshad said. I read this and I thought it was amazing. A GCSE age student who changed his name on Zoom to reconnecting ... which I just thought was amazing. So he could sit back, have a lovely old time, where his teacher just thought he was having connection issues. But I just love that. I thought he deserves, time off for his ingenuity. I think I kind of touched on this earlier, really. We just made sure we took our own medicine. So if we talked about people and planet and profit all the time, I'm a big believer in go big or go home. We either do something brilliant or we don't bother at all. So really we just, focused on that ourselves and made sure we were showing all the time that we were delivering best practice ourselves. So by communicating that to the outside world, I think people genuinely believe us. When we're out there going, we will only work for businesses that are actively working towards the UN Sustainable Development Goals. We turned down 20 opportunities last year in a COVID year, which sounds insane, but we simply will not work for companies who aren't willing to listen. Where there's a potential whiff of greenwashing, we'll walk away. And being so true to our values. And honestly, it was just amazing because we ended up with 45% growth last year. And to do that, I'm so sorry, I had turned everything off. But apparently not. Typical, right? But, and that's what worked well for us, is just the fact that we really stuck to our values. We really doubled down on what we believed we were best placed to do. We were open with people and said, we're not the best people to do that work for you, go elsewhere. And we were so true to our values, and by so clearly wearing that on our sleeve, people, really were drawn to us. And even, for example, I'm dyslexic, so I talked a lot about neurodiversity, which is important as part of the S of social, understanding diversity and its importance, its whole sense. And I think that meant that people believed that we were genuine, authentic, and therefore believed that we were the right partners for them if what they wanted to do was genuinely take a critical look at themselves and make themselves better, and then, tell the world about it.
Excellent. Thanks, Nick. I'm going to actually go to the questions. I think we've got about 15 minutes left. I'm really keen that we get through some of the Q&A from the audience. I'm going to refer to Cormac's question. What will the new normal be? Or will we just revert back to our old poor work-life balance, the daily commute? Will workers actually choose to stay with those companies or just choose to leave? This one for me, I think, is such a great question. For somebody that's worked from home for 15 years, I feel in quite a comfortable place in terms of actually knowing how to manage my day and my environment, and what works for me in terms of being productivity, giving myself rest, giving myself balance. But I think for a lot of people, and adapting to that has been a real challenge. So keen to hear what the panel have got to say. So, Joe, let's go to you. What are your thoughts around kind of that work-life balance, the daily commute?
I don't miss commuting, but a lot of the answer to that question is out of our hands, and it's, based on health considerations. But I think the second part of an answer to that, and to make sure that, a lot of people are equipped to deliver to clients, to have as whole, as possible careers as possible, is ensuring that they're digitally skilled, in the same way that Farshad just talked about. Even his grandma was able to catch up and not be left behind by tech innovation. And that's kind of what you want to see in order to make this a long term without losing out on anything. At KPMG, we have something called digital ninjas, where I think we've got 700 to 800 digital ninjas, and it's part of their day jobs that they help our colleagues become more digitally capable. So it can start from a graduate to our chairman, Bill Michael. But going forward, everyone who joins will be given some sort of digital ninja capability. But their part of their day job is to ensure that capability, because it's all well and good having the right kit, the right material, the right gadgets, the right software. But obviously that software needs to be accessible to everyone, and relatively affordable, I guess, because, you don't want to be rolling it out at the fancy HQ, but not necessarily, across every office in every region, and I say every office, every home. So it needs to be really, really accessible now. And I would say as well, meaningful partnerships, and ensure that your reach is as wide as possible. So we partnered with Microsoft on their 5-year campaign to help 1.5 million people build careers in technology, and that's going to enable this work from home. The more you're digitally capable, the better your options are. There's this big fear around AI taking jobs. 1 in 5, 1 in 4 jobs are going to be taken and given to AI. This is kind of a fearful thing about it, but really it should be enabling us, and that's my view.
Great point, Joe. I'm going to take another question from the audience. Jessica asks a question. How exactly do you do mindlessness, though? Are there exercises? Is it just a matter of turning off your emails, etc.? Nick, you started to speak very passionately about it, so I'm going to go to you, and I'm sure that you can talk a little bit about your experiences there.
I'm someone that couldn't even begin to do yoga. I can barely cope with Pilates. I've got a mind that is constantly on. I have to take melatonin at night to switch it off. I'm just one of those people that is on it. It's actually a sleep condition, so it's just prescribed by the doctors. but I just read it in an article years ago and I thought, oh, it's so interesting, because my problem is, if I was to walk from here to my front door, I would have my phone out and be looking at it. I'm never not connected to something. So mindlessness is just when you're actively doing something, because I can't not do things. I don't just sit around and do nothing. And your mind just naturally, you don't even realize it's happening. So the example I gave earlier of Disney films actually was so true. When you watched Snow White 100 times, but you have to sit there and you're not allowing yourself to go on your phone because it's a bad thing for the kids to see, your mind will naturally go to that place. And in May, I was gardening. I mean, how middle-aged am I? I was digging up a massive flower bed because I felt I needed, what else was I going to do for, a week off? And the kids at that one point must have been in probably watching one of the said Disney films. And without me trying, that's the key thing. Without me trying, I just created a situation where my mind could wander. And suddenly all these things that would have been floating around in my mind for ages just had a chance to settle. So I find it impossible to kind of almost ban myself from my phone, etc. Or certainly, I find it impossible to just say, I'm just going to sit here and think, because I can't do that. It's more just find something that is easy for you to do, relatively, and from a mental perspective, and then your mind will take you there anyway. And that's how it's worked for me. And honestly, I don't think people can innovate unless they give themselves that space and that time sometimes to do it. So now when the kids want to watch a new film, I'm like, no, please don't. Watch Beauty and the Beast again. Because I don't want to be absorbed. That's the key thing, you can't be absorbed in what you're doing, or else it doesn't work.
Brilliant. Thanks, Nick. We can take another question from the audience while they're coming in. One from Beth here, who says, any particular success stories from any of the panelists on innovations for welfare? Farshad, I think you're quite keen to share from Zoom some experiences here.
Absolutely. Yeah, I actually wanted to comment really quick on Nick's point of creating the right environment to be thoughtful. I think that's really, we're always being stimulated by different technologies, whether it's, Zoom chat or phones or the internet. So actually having that environment is really key. So I really appreciated that. So, one example that I could think of, and there's plenty of examples, is, at the height of the pandemic, one of the countries and one of the regions that was really suffering was obviously a lot of the countries, but Latin America and Brazil in particular, there's a use case that comes to mind. There's this organization called CONASEMS, which is really large healthcare organization that, that has doctors and patients and many kind of different levels of healthcare professionals that they support. And one thing, obviously, that they needed to do was to go virtually overnight, and they needed the resources, and they needed to hit a switch and turn it on overnight to enable everyone. So Zoom provided 40,000 licenses for them to do so. And some of the things that we've seen and how they trained doctors quickly within the span of a week to go out there and support different clinics and hospitals, and to hear from patients and their experiences of how quickly, I was in the suburban area, I wasn't necessarily had any form of transportation to get to a doctor, and Zoom was able to break those barriers for me and to connect me with help when I needed it. And just the hundreds of doctors and different use cases that we saw across that CONASEMS organizations was really eye-opening for us, and really, makes us proud of kind of what we do.
Excellent. Great to hear that.
Just to add on that, it's not, I don't know if it quite matches that question, but what we did definitely see is big tech companies or big tech platforms alter the way that they delivered content earlier on in the pandemic. And, I'm not saying everything was economically sustainable for all these companies, but, for instance, media companies, we saw subscription news outlets remove the paywall for coronavirus-related findings when it would be educational to their audiences. We saw social media companies marking fake news as spam. So that, that's where you want to see social media and tech platforms being responsible in the middle of a healthcare crisis. So I thought that was, one to note as well.
Great, thanks, Joe. One of the perks of me being the facilitator is meaning that I can actually ask a question that I want to ask now. My question for the panelists is around creating an environment where you can truly innovate. So we are dispersed, we are remote. The best type of innovation potentially comes from being face to face. How do you innovate remotely? What are the barriers there, and how have you overcome those? Joe, as you're on screen, do you fancy having a go at that? And I've thrown that a little bit at you.
Sorry, I'm on mute. So, I mean, one of the things that KPMG were quite helpful in doing is they launched this work from home podcast. And we kind of all, like, for instance, within the comms team, we all talk about it on our weekly call. So in terms of team bonding, but it was obviously helpful. It gave us a universal topic to talk about, other than what we've watched on Netflix. But also it guided some innovation. It was inspiring because we had different guests regularly, and people who aren't, the type to go and search for their own podcast to watch, guests were brought into their own homes. In terms of digital transformation, we were just unbelievably lucky because we just about completed the UK-wide rollout or transition transition to Teams. I think we had like 99% adoption or something like that already. So people were already upskilled. But I talked about those digital ninjas earlier. I talked about partnering with really innovative companies, and I think moves like that are really, really helpful. And sorry, will you repeat the question for me one more time so I make sure I stay on topic and I don't.
No, it was really around creating. It was around creating an environment to truly innovate. How do you collaborate remotely, and how have you overcome those barriers, not being face to face?
So I think you really just have to think outside the box. So for instance, for our annual company-wide, our annual offsite, I guess you call it, we attempted to break a Guinness World Record. I actually need to find out whether we did, but to have as many the most employees learning to code at once. So that kind of marries weds the two things that I've kind of talked about in terms of innovation and digital skills, ensuring that people are capable to innovate and to be successful in their careers for as long as possible, but also inspiring. I've never thought I would learn to code, even though I work in tech alongside the industry, and opportunities like that really open minds. So yeah, just thinking outside of the box and making those opportunities as accessible as possible to your workforce.
Excellent. Thanks, Joe.
We
really are. Oh, go on.
I was just going to jump in and firstly apologise. I have turned off that, and I don't know why I keep coming. I'm a tech failure. The only thing I would add is about giving people stimulation. It is so important when we're trapped in our own world. So providing access to people, to brilliant speakers, to events, to thoughts, to interesting topics, that keep the mind busy, so that they can get inspiration from different places. And one thing that I do that sounds really weird, but I reach out to people all the time and say, I'm trapped in my own echo chamber at the moment. Do you want to have a virtual coffee? There's no agenda. And honestly, the response I get is amazing. It's just via LinkedIn, and I try.
I do that too.
2 or 3 times a week, I meet strangers online. That sounds totally dodgy. But the stimulation is to have a conversation about something different. And then that's what keeps, the mind alive, really. And that's how you can innovate. That's how you create an environment where people can innovate, by providing that stimulation.
Excellent. Thanks, Nick. We're coming really towards the end of the session. So really only leaves me with 2 things. Firstly, thank you to the amazing panelists. So Joe, Farshad, Nick, thank you very much for your time. Been great getting to know you virtually. And we will hopefully have a celebration in person one day where we can celebrate getting through the session. Secondly, thank you to the audience. Thank you for your questions. Sorry if we didn't get through to all of your questions, but thank you for staying with us. Thank you for your interaction. Stay safe, stay with us, and I think we'll be going back to Polly anytime now.
Thank you, Matt, and thank you, everyone. That was really fascinating to hear the perspectives of 3 very different businesses and brands. And, you know, you do think we're working from home, you've got all this spare time, but actually the commute where you've got that mind-numbing time where you could go to decombust, it's really important to make sure you have that in your day still. So really good to have that point and something to reflect on. To jump onto the next session, which is session 5 of today, click watch session on the right-hand side of your screen, and we'll see you shortly. Thank you.